Welcome to lesson 2.1. Before we really start linear functions, one of the main things we need to talk about is slope, because slope is a key factor in a linear function. If you don't know how to find the slope or what slope is, then linear functions are not going to make any sense to you. So first we're going to talk about the different types of slope, and then we're going to kind of work a few problems. So first we're going to start with positive slope. So positive slope, your line is going to be going upwards. So remember, we read a graph left to right. So reading it left to right, the line is going to be going up. It's going to be increasing. So in the positive section, you notice here's the table. So we're going to find the rate of change. So how much am I adding or subtracting, but since we're positive, we're going to be adding. How do I go from -2 to 0? I add 2. And how do I go from 0 to 2? I add 2. Okay, so remember that slope for linear functions has to have a constant rate of change. So -1 or -2 to 1, I'm adding 1. -1 to 1, I'm adding 1. So remember, slope is the y change over the x change. So the slope is changing, the y is changing by 2, and the x is changing by 1, so the slope is 2. Okay, so now we can graph this equation. So 0, 2 is right here. -1, 0 is right here, and -2, -2 is right here. And if we draw that, we have a straight line, right? Well, that line, the amount it's increasing by is the slope. So how am I going from this point to this point, and this point to this point is 2 over 1, okay? So 2 over 1. 2 over 1. So the y change over the x change. So that means that has positive slope. Okay, so now let's look at negative slope. Negative slope means the line is going to be decreasing. Okay, so first things first, let's look at the table. So how am I going from 3 to 2? I'm subtracting 1. I'm going from 2 to 1, I'm subtracting 1. Then on the x's, I'm adding 1. Okay, so now when I do this, the y change over the x change, that's -1 over 1, which is -1. So my slope is -1. So I'm going to be decreasing by 1. Now, if I go to graph these points, so -1, 3, 0, 2, and 1, 1, it's right here, and I draw that line, that's my linear function right there. My slope, if I count it, I'm going down 1, down 1, down 1, down 1, down 1 over 1. So that's down 1 over 1. Okay, so my slope is -1. Okay, so then let's talk about zero slope. Zero slope, think about it. If something, so slope is how much I'm going up or down out of slant, right? So if I say there is zero slope, that means that it's just a flat line. It's flat, right? So a hill has slope, but a flat piece of land like the floor in my classroom has zero slope. It's just a flat space. You're not like going up or down on it. It's just flat. It's level, okay? So again, we're gonna look at the table. So I'm increasing, how do I go from 2 to 2? I'm adding 0. But on the x values, I'm adding 1, right? So the y change over the x change, the y is changing by 0 and the x is changing by 1. So that means 0 divided by 1 is just 0. So the slope is 0. Okay, so now if we graph that line, I have -1, 2, 0, 2, and 1, 2. If you notice, what kind of line is this? It's just a straight, flat line. So my slope is 0. Okay, because it's not going up or down. It's just literally right here. It's just not going anywhere. It's flat. So it is 0. Okay, now let's look at undefined. So the only thing that is undefined in mathematics is when you're dividing by 0. We can't divide by nothing. So that's undefined in our system of mathematics. So if I look at this table, on y values I'm increasing by 1, and on the x values I'm increasing by 0. Okay, and remember that undefined or slope is y change over x change. So that's going to be 0 over 1, and that is undefined. That's not 0, it's undefined. So if you look at this and you graph it, so I have 2, 1, 2, 2, and 2, 3. If you look, this line is straight up and down. It's a vertical line. That means that its slope is completely undefined. There is no slope. It's undefined. Okay, you can't go up 1 over 1 for that because it's straight up and down. Okay, so those are the 4 different types of slopes. So now let's go into the foldable so you can flip open the tabs. So I'm going to start with positive slope, which on my screen is this first square, but it's going to be on your right side. Okay, so find the equation that says y equals 1/2 x minus 2, and that's where you're supposed to be. Okay, so with that, remember, slope is the y change over the x change. Now, if I'm looking at my equation, here's my slope, the 1/2, okay? So since my slope is 1/2, it's y change over x change, so 1 over 2, okay? Then I also know that, the y-intercept is right here, right? That's y equals mx plus b. That was from last year. So -2 is my slope, or my y-intercept, so that's going to be -2 right here, okay? And so every time I add 2 to the x values, which is my x change right here, I'm adding 1 to the y values. So -3 plus 1 is -2, and -2 plus 1 is -1. Okay, so now I can graph this a few different ways. So my rise over run is 1/2. Okay, so when I go to graph this, I have my y-intercept is -2, so -2. And then my slope is 1/2, so I'm going to go up 1 over 2. Okay, so up 1 over 2. Oh, excuse me, my y-intercept is -2, not +2. Oops, my bad. Okay, so up 1 over 2. Up 1 over 2. Or I can go down 1 to the left 2. Okay, and when I draw my line, there's my linear equation, and that's my slope. Okay, my slope is the slant of the line. Okay, how far steep is the line? Okay, so that's how you find it from a table, from a graph. If you have the point, you can literally count. I'm going up and over, so I'm going up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2, and that's your slope. Your x changes the y changes the up, the x changes the over. So rise, how much you go up and down, run, over 2. So then I have, you can also find it another way. So down here below, I have 2 points. So I'm going to pick some from the table. So I have -2, -3. This is just from the table. And then 0, -2. So you can do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So that's -2 minus -3, or, and then the x2 minus x1, 0 minus -2, which equals, so -2 minus -3 is +1, and then 0 minus -2 is +2, because remember, a double negative is positive. So my slope is a +1/2. Okay, so you can find slope from a table, from the equation, from the graph, or from 2 points. Okay, so now let's go to negative slope. So I have y equals -2x plus 1. So my y-intercept is 1. So when x is 0, y is 1. Okay, so now I'm going to use that slope. So my slope is -2/1. Okay, so every time I increase the x value by 1, which is what I'm doing on this table, I'm decreasing the y value by 2. So 1 minus 2 is going to be -1, and 3 minus 2 is 1. Okay, so my rise over run is -2/1. Okay, so if I graph my points, so 0, 1, -1, 3, and 1, -1, and I draw my line, I can find my slope, because if, look, I go from this point, I'm going down 2 to the right 1, right? Rise over run. Down 2 to the right 1. Down 2 to the right 1. Okay, so that's how you can find your slope. The other way you can find your slope is if you pick 2 points, so -1, 3, and 0, 1, and you do that, you plug it into y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So that would be 1 minus 3, and then 0 minus -1. Well, 1 minus 3 is -2, and 0 minus -1 is +1. So my slope is negative. Okay? So now, y equals 3. So we're going to go to 0 slope. So y equals 3 is a line, but any x value I pick, my y value is going to be 3, right? It's not changing. Nothing's happening to it. So y is always going to be 3, no matter the x value I pick. But my slope is 0, so that means my y change is 0. And my x change really could be anything, but it's going to be 1. So I'm going to have -1, 0, and 1. So if you notice, I add 1 here, and I'm adding 0 here. Y change over x change. So my rise over run is going to be 0/1. So I'm not going to rise at all, but I'm going to go over 1. So if you look at that on the graph, so -1, 3, I'm not rising any, but I'm going to go over 1, and that's the next point, 0, 3, and 1, 3. So my line is just a flat line. It's not going anywhere. It's not rising. It's just staying flat. It's running. It's going side to side, but it's not going up at all. Okay, so that means my slope is 0. Okay, another way you can find that is if you pick 2 points. So I'm going to say, I'm going to do 0, 3, and 1, 3. So if I do y2 minus y1, so 3 minus 3 over x2 minus x1, 3 minus 3 is 0, and 1 minus 0 is 1. So all of those lead to a 0 slope. So if you have y equals a number and they want you to graph that equation, that just means you're going to have a horizontal line, and that means its slope is 0. Okay, now if I have x equals -3, that means for any y value, my x value is going to be -3. So my x value is going to be -3, no matter what. Even if I have any crazy type of y value, it's going to be -3. So that means that my y values are increasing by 1, but my x values are increasing by nothing. So if you look at that, that's going to be 1 over 0, which is undefined. You can't divide by 0, so that's undefined. So your rise over your run is you're going to go rise 1 and not go over any. So if I graph those, so -3, 1, and then -3, 0, and then -3, 1, you notice I'm going up or down 1, but I'm not moving it all left and right. So that means I'm going to have a vertical line. So if you get a vertical line straight up and down, that means that your slope is undefined. It can't happen. It's undefined. So it's a vertical line. So if you got x equals a number, then your line's going to be vertical. So to find the slope with the points, you can pick one from the table. So I'm going to do -3 and -1, and then -3 and 0. So if I do that, y2, 0, minus -1, and then x2 minus x1, 0 minus -1 is 1, -3 minus -3 is 0, so that slope means it's undefined. So remember, slope is the constant rate of change. It can be positive, negative, undefined, or 0. And you can see how, and so we're going to work on this a little more of how to identify slope in each situations. But that's it for lesson 2.1. Bye.